Okay, good evening everybody, councillors and gallery. I welcome you here all to this meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live over the internet on the council's website. Councillors will be available after the meeting if any member of the gallery wish to discuss the issues of interest. We commence the meeting with the following prayer. Almighty God, we humbly request that you bestow your blessings upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the betterment of the peoples of Cardinia Shire. Amen. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong Wurundjeri people and pay respects to their elders, past, present and future. It's really great to note that we have no apologies for this evening. We have a full house of councillors. Just see it. This is the second page. Sorry. This. So minutes of previous meeting. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the meetings as listed? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Jodie Owen. Can I have a seconder, thanks? Councillor Wilmot. All those in favour? For? Carried. Councillors, are there any declaration of interest this evening? No declaration of interest. Ordinary business, that the council conducts its meetings accordingly to the consent agenda. Councillors have advised of the matters for consideration this evening that they wish to discuss or debate. We call it withdrawing. The remaining items will be adopted without discussion. Item 6 has been drawn from tonight's proceedings. We have item 1, development of 900 Princess Highway as withdrawn by Councillor Michael Schilling. Councillor Schilling, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, having considered all matters required under Section 60 of the Planning Environment Act 1987 in relation to planning permit T1 80454, decides to grant a permit for the use development of the land in stages for a place of assembly, cinema, food and drink premises, medical centre, shops, including a discount department store, supermarket, creation of easement, signage, reduction in car parking, sale and consumption of liquor, and to create alternate access to a road zone Category 1, generally in accordance with the endorsed plans, subject to the 47 conditions which are listed in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Carol Ryan. Back to you, Councillor Schilling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ryan, for seconding this item tonight. This particular item has generated significant interest in the local community over the past few years since being elected to council. However, there is something as a council we need to be very clear on. Tonight is not a debate whether Pakenham gets a Kmart or not. Tonight, as a council, we're tasked to making an important decision regarding 900 Princess Highway, Pakenham, and whether we believe, with the best available evidence, that this development is suitable at this particular site. We also have to ensure that such a development is in line with the Cardinia planning scheme, local structure plans, and the strategic direction of council. This proposal includes a place of assembly, cinema, includes an outdoor terrace, a medical centre, a supermarket, specialty shops, and a discount department store. Whilst I acknowledge the overwhelming community desire for a more diversified retail experience, as councillors we have to be mindful of future development in the Shire and how the decisions we make today will impact our community not only now, but in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time to come. Council staff invest a lot of money and energy into planning communities that are able to thrive. And by doing this, we're able to ensure our community receives social and economic benefit brought from a mix of both private and also government investments. And structure plans are one way that we are able to achieve this. This proposal is an example of a development that I believe overall will bring a net benefit to our community. It will also provide our residents with experiences that have never been on offer before within our Shire. I think as a council, this would certainly be something that we would be able to celebrate. As a council group, there has been much debate over this proposal over several weeks, and as people will be aware, the initial recommendation for this was for a refusal from our council officers. There are elements of this refusal that I agree with. Whilst I want to see the additional retail options for our community, I do believe that this proposal is somewhat an overdevelopment on that particular site. The plans are publicly available, so if people are interested in having a look at what these initial plans were, please have a look. The issue that I had was that this development engulfs almost the entirety of the 900 Princess Highway site. The facade of the building, partially around the non-entrance sections of the proposal, are dull, uninviting, and only have a 34% activation. In conjunction with this, there's a loading dock proposed to run along Olympic Way, combined with the proposal from the developer for a car parking reduction of 200 spots. Anyone that utilises Cardinia Life on a weekend will know the nightmare that car parking is for people who are playing sport. So in its current form, this application would only further compound the car parking issues facing the community. Another reason why this development was recommended for refusal is because it didn't sit in line with the Officer Structure Plan. Now, we know that the Officer Town Centre has been earmarked for major retail outlets, cinemas, mixed retail. Perhaps if the Officer Town Centre was abuzz with activity right now, we might not all be sitting here tonight discussing this. But unfortunately, until Development Victoria are a little bit more proactive and release the land that the private investors are asking them to release the land that council are asking them to release, we sit here tonight. And I do find it ironic that Development Victoria have provided an objection to this site when the actual reason why we're in this situation is because there hasn't been land released to the market for such a development where it has been envisaged. In terms of the Pakenham Activity Centre, I think it's paramount that we get our latest structure plan implemented and working well for the community. I do believe that there's an incredibly bright future for the main street of Pakenham, perhaps not in the way that we traditionally think. I do think that the extra 26,000 residents moving into Pakenham East, along with the 6 families a day moving into the Shire, will provide significant opportunity for the Main Street Activity Centre. At the end of the day, there has been a lot of commentary on the best location for this development. A lot of people have referenced the old Woolworths site, they've referenced the Officer Town Centre. I'd just like to highlight right now that these are massive hypotheticals. We cannot control as a council where private business lands in the Shire. We can't tell a private business, please occupy the old Woolworths site. We can't tell Development Victoria, release your land. Clearly we've tried that and it hasn't worked up until this date. Therefore, the discussion is only about 900 Princess Highway. Up until now, it seems like I'm arguing against this proposed development, where in fact I am supportive of the broader principles. I have mentioned earlier that there are some flaws in this application, and without some significant permanent amendments, I wouldn't be able to support this development. Over the past 3 weeks, I've worked with council staff to develop over 47 conditions, which span over just over 7 pages, which I believe, if implemented, will provide a development which will be conducive to the needs of our local residents and will really facilitate a much better synergy between Cardinia Life and the establishment and this proposed development. I also think that we can develop a much better synergy between this development and the Tumark Reserve as well, particularly as we move into the future of reworking that site. I've consulted with the community and I believe that these conditions will alleviate some of the concerns. Probably the biggest one that we have received is around car parking. With this busy hub in Cardinia Life, under no circumstances should it be appropriate for development to be granted such a significant car parking reduction. I would just like to go over some of the amendments. I won't go over all 47 because we'll be here all night, but I'd like to go over the first block, which mainly go around the design of the building and the way that the building can be redesigned to work well for the community.
You've had 6 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you. Can I be granted 1 more minute? Thank you, Mayor. So these conditions go along the lines of external entrances for retail shops with the front facade. That will activate the street side of it. I'm looking for open space along the front leading onto Cardinia Life, so there's open space for people to be able to meet, be able to talk, be able to dine. I'm also asking that the number of car parking not represent more than a 10% reduction from clause 52.06 requirement, which we already have in our planning scheme. And I'm also asking for the relocation of the loading dock to go along the other side of the building so it's not off Olympic Boulevard. Finally, I'm just also asking that public access to the car park not be restricted without the consent of the authority. As I've said, lots of debate around this and I'm interested in hearing Council's thoughts. I'm going with approving the development with some significant conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Well done. Second to speak, Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you, Councillor Schilling for your input and the amendments, and I'm in support. That's why I'm seconding your amendments. So I'm going to go down a different road, and because I think Councillor Schilling has covered quite a bit. I drove around the shopping centres all around Pakenham area up to Arena and had a look at the shops and what was on offer. And I've done a number of, in the main street, we have 6 to 7 real estate agents. We have 6 medical centres. We have 3 pizza places, massage shops, we've got at least 7. Beauty shops 2, hairdressers 10, newsagents 3, solicitors 6. So most of the main street in Pakenham is made up of real estate agents, hairdressers, solicitors, and masseur shops. So if you go down there, you'll see that that doesn't have much shopping to offer as far as clothing. It has 1 clothing store. Oh, sorry, I apologise, 2. So that gives you a bit of a rundown there. My concerns too was the loading zone. I think that will cause quite a few problems with traffic hazards, backing in, backing out, whichever way the truck goes. We already have traffic congestion there, so I'd like to see a little bit better infrastructure on that side. Cameras on the main wall towards Olympic Way, I think that would be good. And also a speed limit of 40 people speed there. Some of the parking that has been lost is on that private land that is not actually officiated for parking. But we have residents that park there because they don't want to walk too far. And there is sufficient parking further around as far as the sports centre goes in the evening. So we've got to look at that. And but I still think that we do need to look at some more parking. It's a mud patch when 4-wheel drives do skiddies on that in winter on that vacant land. Sometimes we might have the circus there. Other than that, that land is not really used for much at all. The shopping complex is not going to, I don't see a problem with the other shops, I think, because we've got a lot of cafes. We don't have retail stores as far as clothing or home products in the area. It seems that we have to go to Fountain Gate for an awful trip. For 20 years, we've been promised a cinema in Pakenham. It may not happen, but it may happen. And for 20 years we were promised Kmart. Hasn't happened, might happen. We've got to wait and see. I think the whole thing is that it will bring employment, and in Pakenham area we have problems with employment. There's not enough sufficient employment for our residents, especially those who don't have driver's licence or for some reason aren't driving. The public transport is not on a regular basis at times. It's unreliable, and I think that can be a problem. So I think Fountain Gate is closer to people that live in Officer, so we've got to travel a lot further for the employment or for anything. So I think, it will encourage more employment. It will keep the economy at a better state by having these type of shops in the area, but we will have to wait and see what the outcome will be. And I thank Councillor Schilling because I know he'll add some more to what I've said. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments, statements on debate about this subject from other councillors, either for or against Councillor Brett Owen? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors who've spoken already. I'll be voting against this alternate motion. It has been a very hard decision-making process for councillors, one of the hardest in my long time on council, because there's so many pros and cons for this development. I would love to see a cinema in our Shire. This application offers that, but I'm concerned that it is a staged development. I'm concerned that we may not see a cinema. Really concerned. I understand the applicant had the option to apply for this all to be, one stage, but that wasn't elected. So it is a staged development, and I'm really concerned that cinemas may not occur at all. And it is disappointing. We did have a application for cinemas in Siding Avenue, as other councillors have spoken about Development Victoria not making the lots available. So that's an issue. But I am concerned about the impact this will have on our major activity centres around Pakenham. Long history with the growth of retail in Pakenham, but I am concerned that this will further detract from Main Street, and we need to protect that area and enhance that. Also, Officer will be a major activity centre, close to public transport, as in trains. We need to try and do as much as we can to activate this. But this subject site, public transport is not great, in my opinion. Mainly relying on a bus network, significant distances with trains. I think it will have an adverse impact on Lakeside Village. We know there's a group of shops at Lakeside which I think will have a detrimental impact on them if this is voted on. I disagree with the officer's comments in the report about reduction in car parking. I'm concerned about those levels, and I'm really concerned about that, and that should be a reason for refusal, in my opinion. So, as I reiterate, this has been a very difficult decision for councillors, but I'm really sure that we need to protect our planned major activity centres, that is Main Street area and Officer, and I will be opposing this alternate motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Well said. Any other councillors to report on this? Councillor Colin Ross. Councillor.
We can only look at what's in front of us with the application. We can't guesswork or look for any others. This is the first opportunity to have a Kmart brought into Pakenham in the last 12 years that I know of on council. And for people to say that they don't consider to put a Kmart there, their presentation to council on the USB had a Kmart in it. Their presentation for half an hour in front of us had a Kmart in it. Even the officer's report has got Kmart written in it twice. Their Facebook presentation had a Kmart. I tell you, if you were going to build something and then you've told people not the truth, look out. So that's what they've put out there. I put it out on Facebook that we need a Kmart and a cinema. 1,000 likes. 15 didn't like, and there was literally hundreds, 350 people shared the approval on this. And people might sort of say, oh, well, but that's what was out there. That's what people's feedback was. And when you have a look at it, if you compare suburbs with suburbs, we've got roughly 56,000 people living in Pakenham now. With Pakenham East, we'll have another 26,000 people. So we'll have 82,000 people living in Pakenham. And at the moment in Officer, there's 7,000 to 8,000 people. And what people are saying is, we want it in Officer, we don't want it in Pakenham. Those people in Pakenham drive now. This is new money coming into the area with a Kmart. People drive to Fountain Gate now to spend their money. It will bring jobs. If they bring the cinemas, which they've also quoted to that they're going to bring, it'll have things locally. I had a senior sergeant of police in Dever Hills actually put a post up, and I've never seen him post before, saying, this is wonderful that you're going to offer recreational activities in Pakenham so the youth don't have to leave. They could walk there, they could ride there, their parents can drive them easily, and it brings employment as well. And when you have a look at another area, have a look at Glen Waverley, where I got brought up. 46,000 people. They've got the Glen Shopping Centre, Brandon Park, Pinewood, Sindel shops. They've got 2 cinemas. They've got the Mount Waverley shops, the Wheelers Hill shops, and you've got Chadstone nearby. And everyone said every time they build a new one, it's in the wrong place. It doesn't have enough basically facilities there for the people or send them all broke. It never did. It brought new people to the area. And when you have a look through this will bring new money, new jobs, and there are no other developments. People say we're going to try and move it so that there's going to be these other ones created. There's examples in Cardinia Shire where we actually tried to do that and say we want the development to go over there, but actually it didn't go over there. What you got was not what you set up to get. So with this, you can actually assure that what they've put up, they better deliver on, because that's what they've told us. And I just think it's terrible to think that the people of Pakenham, with nearly 82,000 people going to live in a very short time, won't have a Kmart, got to drive to Fountain Gate. People complain about the roads. I can remember the roads people complained about when they built the freeway out here, and they had pictures on the main street saying, all the shops will go broke on the old Pakenham on Princess Highway. There's no one there, people standing in the middle. Now it's as busy as it ever was. So I just think this is a once in a generation opportunity to bring something like this to Pakenham. All we can do is look at the developments in front of us, and if we don't accept it, there is a mirage out there that some people think that is going to pop up. It may never pop up like it hasn't in the last 20 years. This is our opportunity, and I'd urge my fellow councillors to support this and bring something that the people of Pakenham want and need to Pakenham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers on this subject? Any other councillors? Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd firstly like to just thank Councillor Schilling for his alternative motion and the work he's put into this. Whilst I won't be supporting it tonight, I do appreciate how much work and effort you've put into it, and it has been considerable. I have some major concerns about this development. Firstly, one of my major concerns is the increased traffic on Olympic Way. And although the alternative motion does address the loading bay and shifts it from the southern elevation to the western elevation, the trucks will still enter via Olympic Way. Now, a normal everyday little supermarket has a minimum of 6 deliveries a day. Often it'll be up to 10 deliveries. You've got a Kmart that'll have who knows how many deliveries on a daily basis, but probably similar. You've got 20 odd small retail outlets and food outlets. They'll all have deliveries every single day. So that adds up to a heck of a lot of truck movements on that road, which is already a very narrow road. It's got on-street parking on that road. You've got a childcare centre on that road as well, and you've got Cardinia Life, which is extremely busy on the weekends. So that, to me, spells disaster. I also acknowledge the car park shortage that Councillor Owen's already spoken about. In the initial report, 238 car park reduction. That's huge. That's 27% of the parking that they're supposed to allocate is missing. Even with a 10% reduction that's in the alternative motion, that's still 85 car parks as a reduction in an area that is already at capacity with sporting facilities. If you go down there on a Saturday morning, it's busy. The average attendance at Cardinia Life on a Saturday morning over August was 3,944. So that's a lot of car movements again, and a lot of car parking that is needed. So it's at capacity for those reasons. But I'm also really concerned about the impact that this is going to have on our other retail centres. The Cardinia Roads Precinct Construction Plan guides our long-term development through to meet our future needs. This is done in part by establishing a hierarchy of activity centres. Major activity centres at Pakenham and Officer are noted and supporting neighbourhood activity centres, specifically located at Lakeside and Arena. This proposal doesn't reflect this hierarchy, as the site doesn't form part of the Lakeside Neighbourhood Activity Centre. The structure plan also clearly defines commercial land as core business or peripheral commercial. Core business provides for day-to-day needs, while peripheral commercial provides other less utilised services. The subject site is identified as peripheral commercial development. However, this proposal is core retail development. The proposal is likely to have a devastating impact on the existing retail areas, as well as a major impact on the future development of the Officer Town Centre. Residents who have bought in Officer have done so with the expectation that the retail area planned along the Siding Avenue precinct would include a large discount department store and a cinema. And that won't happen if this development goes through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'd like to thank the other speakers for their input to date. I won't be supporting this alternate motion. There's a saying in fishing, if you put the right type of bait out, you can catch any fish. And I think big bait is Kmart and cinemas. Listening to Councillor Schilling here, most of his argument was against it, really, the reasons he gave, not so much for it. Councillor Ryan was saying that let's wait and see what happens there. Councillor Ross, sorry, Colin. Councillor Ross said that they've said there's going to be a Kmart, they've said there's going to be cinemas, and they better do it. What do we do if they don't? What do we do if they don't? It's not Kmart building this. It's not Village Cinemas building this. It's a developer. He'll have the space. Kmart, if the place is expanding as much as you're saying, and it certainly is, they'll do their numbers. If this is a viable proposition, Kmart will beat our door down to put a development. The way I see this development is a big entity floating around in space looking for somewhere to plonk themselves. And if seen there's a block of land there, let's squeeze ourselves in there. We have highly trained and dedicated officers, planning officers, that have put together over the years a structured plan on how Cardinia Shire is going to be developed. It's already been said that the shops down the main street are deserted because of not having the right amount of shops or the right type of shops. What's this going to do to our neighbourhood shopping activity centres? You know, the lakesides, and the ones further out. Are we going to see empty shops there and people travel into this development? What happens if all of a sudden it doesn't realise Kmart's predictions, and Kmart decide that it's not such a good idea being here, and then we have another big conglomerate that's empty? Now, I would love to see a Kmart in Pakenham, don't get me wrong, and I'd love to see theatres. I'm a great theatre goer. I don't think this has been substantiated by the developer in respect of the numbers he's put forward. They're unsubstantiated. I trust our planning people who have a vision that this council and other councillors have put forward. This is how we want to see our council or our district developed. We don't want to see somewhere where we're going to plonk something in the middle and we're going to drain the blood out of everything around it. And that's what's going to happen. And the lure of saying, we've got a Kmart, look at us, I think is drawing too long a bow to sort of say, let's approve this irregardless. Because it is going to impact, make no mistake, and it will be impact to the good for a lot of people that want to do their shopping here in Pakenham. But what about the people that's just out a little bit? The people who are employed at those little shopping centres that all of a sudden become empty. Look at Woolworths down the street here, empty. Prime location for a Kmart, empty. If the numbers were that good, you know who'd be grabbing that? The same with Masters, when Masters became empty. If the numbers were that good that Kmart wanted to come here, and they're a business like everything else, and if the numbers stack up, they'll be here. Don't worry about that. I'm suggesting the numbers don't stack up, and I'll be voting against this. And in particular, the parking, let's not leave a legacy around that precinct there where we've got fine recreational activity, sporting activities there, that we're going to plonk this thing in the middle of it. And I don't know whether you've been there trying to get a park when the basketball and the tennis is on. It's very, very difficult. And add the football to that, and this business here is going to plonk in there, and they're going to have a reduction in car parking. If they give an extra 100 more than they needed, I'd say good on them. They're trying. But they're not trying 1 inch. They're dragging everything back and squeezing every bit out of they can out of the fruit. So, Mayor, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any other want to speak on this subject? No one else? We'll go straight to the vote. Oh, back to the movers. Sorry, Councillor. I forgot you need to sum up.
That's fine.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for everyone that spoke on this item. And as I said in my opening remarks, this has been something that has sparked a lot of debate around this council, and we've been speaking about it for weeks. So look, I can truly say whatever the outcome is tonight, the community have definitely got a very well debated planning application from this council, and I don't think there's a single councillor around this room who hasn't read over this application with a fine comb and asked a barrel of questions to go along. Look, just in my closing remarks, if we're looking at the display of business around the Shire, if we sit here idle and we don't do anything for business development in the Shire, yes, this will take business away from the core centres. However, we shouldn't be doing that. If this was approved tonight, we would have a good 2 to 3 years that we could diversify our marketing strategies for our local business to be able to create a unique retail experience across the Shire, across the activity centre, to make sure that we're not seeing a slump for our local retailers. There's already talk of forming a new Pakenham business group to do exactly that. Exactly that. These businesses can all coexist in the Shire if you put the right marketing tools behind it and you have the right community drive behind it. Central Pakenham Main Street, is not going to be the retail hub of a Kmart and a Village Cinema. That has a very unique retail experience, and in the next 10 years, Pakenham Main Street will probably not look like it does today. We know what the future structure plan is going to look like at Pakenham Main Street, and it isn't going to be for big multi-discount retail stores for the community to enjoy. It's going to be more around alfresco dining, around hospitality, around improving the small businesses that are already there now. Also, all of these amendments and conditions that I've put on, there are 47 of them. Out of those 47, they address the issue with car parking for the building. They do. There's also another amendment condition that I've put in, that this retailer would not be able to restrict access to the public to their car park, meaning that those people that park already along the side of Olympic Boulevard, unless they get written permission from council, they will have to let residents use their car park for morning sport. And if we think at 9 in the morning that a supermarket's going to be at full capacity, well, I don't think that's the case at all. But look, at the end of the day, we've got 47 conditions that I've listed as part of this that I think do address the bulk of the concerns from our communities, from the business communities. And I'm not suggesting that this be built and then we just sit back and wait for business to, I think the comment was, suck the blood out of our local businesses. I'm saying we're working proactively with businesses to say, hey, this is coming along now. How can we further enhance the businesses that we have and make sure that everyone can get a slice of the pie? And as we get 26,000 more residents in our estate in Pakenham East in the next few years, that's a fair, decent size to service this particular area. So I'm going to leave it up to the vote now, and we'll see what happens. But I'd like to thank councillors, particularly during this last 3 weeks. This has been an incredibly respectful debate that we've all had with one another, and I look forward to seeing the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Thank you. Okay, now we'll go to the vote. All those for the motion. For? Against?
Can I call a division, please, Mr Mayor?
You certainly can, Councillor. All those councillors for the motion, please stand. That's Councillor Ross, Councillor Ryan and Councillor Schilling. Thank you. All those against the motion, please stand. I recognise Councillor Springfield. I'm having one of those nights. It's been a long week. It's only Monday. Councillor Wilmot, yes, I know you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Moore, Councillor Brett Owen, Councillor Brown, and Councillor Jodie Owen. Thank you. May be seated. Thanks. Hope the rest of the meeting goes a bit better than that. Thank you, councillors.
Mr Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to move a motion to adopt the recommendation of the officers in relation to this item.
Thank you,
please.
councillor. I was just going to say, could I have someone to move the motion, the motion of the recommended officers' recommendation? There's also an item in there I think you need to do. So you can move the motion. Thank you, councillor.
So that a refusal to grant planning permit T180454 be issued for the use and development of the land in stages for the complex. I'm not going to read all of that. There is also 5 clauses for mine. The most important clause is the proposal is contrary to the aims and objectives of clause 52.06 car parking, as it does not provide for an appropriate number of car parking spaces having regard to the demand likely to be generated, the activities on the land and the nature of the locality.
Thank you, councillor Owen. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilmot. Back to you, councillor Owen. That's Jodie Owen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't take too much time because I think a lot of the debate was said in regards to Councillor Schilling's motion. What I will put on top of that is I went out and actually spoke to business owners prior to a mishap the other week, and probably the saddest conversation I had was with a gentleman whose family owns the chemist near where the old Woolworths site is, and to hear that they don't draw a wage most weeks due to the fact that Woolworths is gone. Main Street is dead. Why is Main Street dead? It's because there is a place behind that called Marketplace. And why are you going to walk down a street when you can walk under air conditioning, or if it's raining and terrible outside, you can be inside? That's just how things are. For mine, putting this on that site, number one, we've got basketball Saturdays, we've got football, we've got cricket, we've got baseball, we've got little athletics in summer, we've got swimming lessons. It's out of control. Then on top of that, I look at Lakeside. Already they've lost the Bendigo Bank. The talk is the proposal. There's no, let's be honest, there's no leases signed. Like Kmart hasn't signed a lease saying they're going in. A cinema hasn't signed a lease. There's been no lease here either, but the potential was for the Coles Lakeside store to move inside. That might sound well and good, but what the hell happens to another empty shop left in Lakeside Boulevard? The answer is, if you've got food and beverage and everything inside, every one of those mum and dad businesses along Lakeside Boulevard will be gone. We have seen, as Councillor Brown brought up, when Masters went, that site's vacant for ages. The predictors we've got is Development Victoria not releasing land, because currently they are saying we need a population in officer of more than 10,000 people. I would say growing up, for the first 12 years of my life, I was raised in North Dandenong, and we begged and borrowed for a cinema at Dandenong, and it never happened. It came to Waverley Gardens, and then when Dandenong finally established, it moved there. Waverley Gardens closed down. Village is now closed down at Dandenong. It's Reading. Most of our young families can't afford the prices for a movie ticket. I would say that although we want parents out and about with kids, Netflix at $17.99 is a lot cheaper than $15 per person. I myself, prefer the movies. If this development was built, I'm sorry, I'd still be going to Fountain Gate because they have the restaurants I like, but that's another story. But I would just say, looking at what the officers, this is their bread and butter, this is what they're paid to do. There is 5 conditions why they believe this should be refused. And for this argument, Mayor, I'm going to stick with our planners and say, no, this is the wrong place for this kind of site. Hopefully, Development Victoria will wake up, release some land and let officer get what they have been promised. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Well said. Could I go to the seconder now? Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. As I've already spoken, I'll reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillors want to speak on this before or after? Thank you, councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I think we've given the impression that we're not against the Kmart, we're not against cinemas at all. What we're saying is that's an inappropriate site for all the reasons that have been stated. I will say, however, that Cranbourne has had 2 goes at having cinemas, and they still have not got cinemas. They had a cinema open there, Village Cinemas, was open for a few years, lack of patronage, closed it down. And I guess we could say that Cranbourne is on comparative scale with Pakenham. A few years later, it opened up again. A private enterprise opened the cinemas again. They operated for a few years, they shut down again. Now, if you look at Cranbourne and the surrounding districts of Cranbourne, whilst not quite as dense as what we're going to have, down the track a little bit, at the minute, they would qualify more for a cinema than what we would population-wise. So, unless contracts have been signed, solid gold contracts with the cinema companies, I doubt whether the cinemas will get off the ground here based on previous experience that I've had with the Cranbourne shopping centres. So I'd just like to throw that in, Mayor, as far as the cinemas go, because that's a big issue. The cinemas is a great selling point, and when we talk about the police supporting this, it's because of the cinemas that kids have somewhere to go. So let's not be blindsided by this. Let's be realistic about it and have a little bit of a think. What sustains cinemas and its population, and other areas have proven that sometimes it doesn't work. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Listening to everyone, it's always interesting to hear everyone's vision of how they see things. I've just jotted down some notes. Masters closed because it was too expensive. Our residents here couldn't afford to buy things from Masters, whereas Bunnings is a lot cheaper. Safeway closed down because the roof was leaking and the owner was not prepared to fix it. So let's keep in mind that these are the reasons why they aren't in the areas that they were before. I just wonder, one of these things too is that they would end up having in the complex 5 new practitioners, and we sure as hell need them in our area because we are growing and our doctor's surgeries are breaking at the seams, and that's through having discussions with doctors in the local area. How is it going to affect shops in the main street when you've got real estate agents, hairdressers? Well, hairdressers was one thing. Tobacco shop, real estate agents, banks. There's not clothing stores there. There's one ladies' clothing store that again may not appeal to people with low incomes, and that's what our community is made up of. Low-income people that come here because they can afford to live here. And I'm speaking on behalf of the community and what has been presented to me through over the years, that we need a department store that caters for not only the home but for clothing, not only for the parents but for the children. And I think we need to keep this in mind, that that's one of the biggest issues, is why I'm voting for the complex with the conditions put in place so that our community does have these things. Lakeside is made up of mainly restaurants. How are clothing stores going to affect the shopping there? Again, with the amount of people that we're going to have in our community, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of employment opportunities for our youth, for seniors that want to go back to work and mothers that want to go back to work after their children gone to school. I'll leave it at that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Ross.
Basically, I say to people, and I've been a councillor for 11 years, if you don't listen to the community, well, it's at your own pleasure. I must say, you know, the amount of support for this is absolutely overwhelming. And I must say, when you have a look at what some of the people have been putting up, like, you know, we want this to move somewhere else. We've got areas like down on Cardinia Road that we tried to manipulate there by putting in planning zones to get people in there. And what we finished up with was no businesses, no commercial space. We've got houses put out in the middle of nowhere with no services or anything, which was the last thing we were told wouldn't happen. If you look at behind Bunnings, that was meant to be a commercial industrial area because there's a bus company there that pulls in, starts their buses at 3 a.m. and pulls in at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. They've now got houses next to them because council rezoned it for housing. So in the end, they're going to lose their businesses because people will be complaining about buses starting. And an officer here, we've been saying for the last 6 or 8 years, there's going to be houses everywhere. We've got a city square over here which doesn't have any shops around it at all. It looks amazingly out of place. I mean, if you think we can just manipulate by looking back, and we can't look for a whole lot of mirages that aren't there. We can only look at the planning application that we've got before us. And the planning application we've got before us is the only thing we've seen like this in the last 12 or 15 years. It could be the only one for the next 20 years. 82,000 people in Pakenham are going to be here saying, and some people will say, well, they might go broke if the cinema goes broke or the Kmart goes broke. Well, do you know what? If people go there and use it, they won't go broke. And I was in the market, I was in the commercial area most of my younger days in butcher shops. And I had one guy who I worked for who owned 13 butcher shops. And he used to go to places and they put a market across the road from Southland. And when they put it across there, he said, we're going to go broke. The butcher shop in Southland will go broke. There were 5 butcher shops over there. He said, don't worry about it. We sell a good product at a reasonable price. It'll bring more people to the area and they'll come across, you'll have more foot traffic. Exactly what happened. Took a little while, but in the end, we got more business. And when I listen to things like car parking, it's going to destroy the sports area. I mean, let's have a look at the amount of time the sports area is used. It's mostly not used Monday to Friday, except a couple of hours for training. So all those places are vacant. Out the front of Masters, I can park my car and my trailer there all the time. There's probably 50 car parks I can fit in across the road. People walk at Fountain Gate from one end to the other. They go to Chadston from one end to the other. And all of a sudden we're worried that people might have to walk 100 metres further for their benefit. It'll probably do them good for their health to walk a little bit further. And when you talk about all of these things, and I just find it absolutely amazing that the 3 councillors in Central Ward who are directly answerable to those people who live in our area are supporting this. And the people who aren't affected by it, who will never get a vote out of those people there, can actually say to the people who are there, well, it's out there. I try and be considerate of people in other areas. If all the councillors in another area supported things, I really try and have a look at what they look through. But I must say, this development, I just find it absolutely staggering. People can use words like, you know, disastrous, devastating, the whole lot of it. And I think you've got to be kidding. Brandon Park, the Glen Shopping Centre, Chadston, Fountain Gate. It's not disastrous. It's okay if you want to shop there. And this will bring new money to Pakenham. This is money that drives out of here. This is jobs that drive out of here and it puts traffic on the roads. This will be the solution for some of this. But if we're hell-bent on bringing this development to officer, where at the moment we've got 7,000 to 8,000 people and that's what we believe where it should be, instead of the 56,000 there now and the 26,000 coming, well, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Redholm. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I love the passion in the room. But a bit of a history lesson. Council used to own this land. Back in 1994 to 1997, we had commissioners where the elected council was sacked and commissioners were brought in and they sold this large parcel of land. So how good would it be if we still had that parcel of land for community benefit? But we don't now. But just a bit of a history lesson, it was sold by the commissioners, my understanding, speaking to a councillor that was sacked, that occurred. So I believe that's correct. Yeah, I don't know. Doug? All right. Anyway, I believe we own the land. We own the land? Okay, well, we own the land. Anyway, so in relation to, we have to be the responsible planning authority. In a different responsible I'm using, but we have to be responsible for the whole area. Councillor Ross, you talk about, you're representing Pakenham, and that's fine, but as councillors, we represent the whole Shire. And, I believe this town centre, which is in Rangers Ward, will be impacted if we allow this through. So we have to be the responsible planning authority. This is a unique site. You look at it, you've got recreation to the east, sort of the south. You've got a kindergarten to the west, and you've got to the north industrial land, quite significant industrial bulky goods, and I don't think that's ideal. When you look at these sort of major cinemas and major sort of retail, they've got to have a captured sort of residential sort of area. Yes, it's got a little bit to the north, a little bit, and there's obviously lakeside, but it's not ideal when you've got those other uses, and that's why I won't be supporting this. It is disconnecting the current retail space in lakeside. It is a standalone. It's not complementing any other sort of activity spaces. I think I've said enough anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors that speak? Councillor Wilmot, before I go back to the mover, Councillor Wilmot, you have the opportunity to speak now if you want to. I'll allow you time if you want.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very quick. My decision tonight isn't based on whether or not I'm going to get votes at the next election over this proposal. My decision, as Councillor Owen has just said, is as the responsible planning authority. We are all councillors for the Shire. Yes, we represent wards, but we make decisions for the betterment of the Shire. And that is what I'm making my decision on tonight. It's not a vote-grabbing decision at all.
Thank you, Councillor. Well said. Before I go to the back to the mover to sum up, I'd just like to make one comment. And I'm not going to mention about the item. I think it's been spoken on enough. I want to thank the councillors, each and every one of you, for the respect you're showing for one another here tonight. It is an emotional, and it's a big item here. And respecting the time limit that you had to speak, it's been, and the gallery for being so patient as well. It's we're up to item 1. We haven't got through item 1 yet, so I just want to make a note of that. That the councillors are being very, very patient, and they've been respectful for the time limit that they've spoken during debate time, and I want to thank them personally because it's I know it's been a big item to speak on, but. Having said that, I will go to Councillor Jodie Owen to sum up. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't take too much time. And yet, I am a Central Ward councillor, proud to be a Central Ward councillor, hence why I went before my mishap and spoke to business owners to find out what mum and dad business owners that, are struggling, what this meant to them. And looking at Facebook and other Instagram, there are a lot of people out there who understand that whacking this in the middle of nowhere is not great. One of my election promises when I was first elected in 2012 was to get things right the first time. I came into a council that there was businesses here, there, everywhere. There was no definite plan. There was no definite vision. We now have that, and I think we'd be silly to let it go. In relation to not catering for a lower socioeconomic group, we have Big W, and I don't go to Big W for the simple fact that on weekends especially you'll get trampled in there because there are a lot of families that go there. If you talk about things that could happen, Cloughland, the new German retailer, is looking out this way. Are they definitely coming? I would say population will do that. They will no doubt talk to our business team and get some land. Costco are the same. Once again, same factors, looking for the right site. So I think in all, residents of Cardinia Shire as a whole should have absolute guarantee that we will fix the employment problems. We already have the train yards and other things that have come to us. And when the areas are right, when we know that something isn't going to be a white elephant and cause that many problems, because I said once, residents say they want Kmart. They want Kmart until they can't park there, until mum can't take her kids to basketball, to dad can't or uncle or whoever can't get to a football match, then I'll tell you what will happen. Councillors' phones will ring off the hook with, "What a bunch of morons you are." So that is where I rest the argument tonight, and I say I stand by our very talented planners, and I absolutely back this being refused on its merits. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jodie Owen. Thank you. Well, councillors, you've heard the debate as portrayed to this evening. I will put the vote towards you. All those in favour? For? Carried.
Can I call for a division, please?
Yes, we can have a division. Yep, fine. I'm happy with the division. Those for the refusal for this officer's recommendation, namely Councillor Jodie Owen, Councillor Brown, Councillor Brett Owen, Councillor Springfield, and Councillor Wilmot, and myself, Councillor Graham Moore, of course. Those against the motion? Stand. Councillor Colin Ross, Councillor Carol Ryan, and Councillor Michael Schilling. You can be seated, councillors. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 2. What a night. Okay, the use and development of land for a place of worship and car park reduction at 2/6 Webster Way, Pakenham, as withdrawn by Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Hopefully this will be a little bit shorter than the first one. We'll try and keep it as brief as possible. The denotion and decision to grant a planning permit T190196 to be issued for use and development of land for a place of worship, signage and reduction in car parking at Factory 2/6 Webster Way, Pakenham, subject to the conditions attached to this report.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Michael Schilling. Back to you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a little bit of concern about this situation, concerned about parking, how many car parks were officiated to each factory. I went down there and visited the majority of people that own factories around the area, around the back as well, and had conversations with them just to see their concerns. And then I also met with the pastor from the, the church, the worship, place of worship. And looking at that, and discovering that there was a confusion about who has how many car spots. And during the time Monkey G's left the premises, and so it was vacated for quite a while, which means the car spots that were allocated to that factory were also used by other factory workers and their visitors to the place of business. So I went to the offices and had a conversation with them as to look into what the concerns were, how many car parks were allocated to each factory, what the lease was, what was going to happen with the church. And so these are some of the things that I looked at. Confirm that Mike's Mechanics does have allotted car spaces to his business. It appears to be 8. There seems to be some confusion with advertising of the application. I have spoken to the planning team and they have confirmed that 41 letters had been sent to nearby residents, and both the days of operation, weekends, Sunday, were advertised in the documentation. This also included the proposed minimum number of people. The maximum number of people during the day is capped at 20. And under the planning scheme, the place of worship is required to provide 6 car spaces, which is allotted in the front of their factory, or building, I should say. It won't be a factory, will it? and 4 at the back. At the front spaces, it will mainly be allocated for people that have disabilities. There is one in particular that is in a wheelchair, and the majority of people that will be there are of senior ages. I think sometimes people had this vision of what a place of worship is, that it's going to have fates, it's going to have all these celebrations, it's going to have weddings, it's going to have funerals. That's not the case here. So after having a conversation, the pastor will be there at least 3 to 4 days, and probably about up to 5 people that will be there. It will be Bible studies and also setting up things for the church. There will not be a charity food support organisation happening there, as this only happens at Endeavour Hills. So I think that was one of the confusions. And as I've already stated, that weddings and funerals are not going to be conducted there. They will be conducted at Endeavour Hills as well. The lease is 3 by 3 and the titles have allotted their 10 car spaces. Sorry, takes a bit to turn the page sometimes, a lot of writing there. So I hope that after investigating this, again with our officers that have gone to extreme times to go and find out for me at short notice, and I really appreciate them giving me the information. I think we need to establish this simply so that there's no confusion of what is going to happen. Monday to Saturday, it will be open at 9 to 5. Sunday, 8 till 6. Main service is on a Sunday, 10 till 1. The maximum number of people at all times will be on a Monday to Saturday, 20. A Sunday, up to 80. If the numbers with parishioners would grow, then they would be considering another size building to do with the parking, because there won't be enough parking to service them. I hope that this clarifies everything for all the owners of all the businesses around. And I think respectfully, everyone just wanted to know what was allocated so there is no confusion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I'll go to the seconder to speak, Councillor Michael Schilling. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ryan, for bringing this to Council. I'm aware that this was listed for the town planning agenda at the last town planning meeting and was deferred, so Councillor Ryan could seek some more information. And now, coming back, I'm in support of this application. If you look at the car parking allotments, during the week, this place of worship does fulfil their car parking requirements, and on a Sunday where they're requiring a reduction in car parking, the surrounding businesses are closed and the street is a dead zone. So I don't see any issue at all with this. They meet the requirements, and I wish them all the best in their operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors to speak? Councillor Brett Owen. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ryan, Councillor Schilling. I support you both. I'm usually not in favour of reduction of car parking, but you summarise it really well in relation to the conditions on condition 5. And, you know, as stated, Sundays where the main activity will occur, where most surrounding businesses will not be operating. And I think it's great to have a business that activates this area when it's not normally, busy at all. I think it's great for a crime prevention type sort of lens, but also just safety. Just have eyes in this area, makes it safer for everyone, and I think it's a great outcome. So I support so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Colin Ross. Councillor Ross.
On this application, this place used to be a place of worship for about 9 years before it changed over to Monkey G's. When it was a place of worship for those who go to places of worship, and we went there, it basically, you have off-peak periods when businesses aren't using car parks, is mainly when they have their busiest time. For those who know about youth groups, often their parents, they don't drive there, the kids, unless they're illegally driving. Their parents drop them off at the place, so therefore there's not a whole lot of cars there during that time. During the week, you might have a few small groups who meet there with small numbers. I'd say Monkey G's, their patronage would have been a whole lot more during the week and numbers all around time as a business, not so much in the off-peak periods. I must say as well, looking at the issue there, and after talking to the people who had the business with the motor mechanic works there, the main concern is really about the success of some of the businesses in the area. If you have a look at Avan across the road, they've actually expanded their operation that much that their car parks now go onto the street. So the public car parks at the end of Webster Way are filled up by cars which have one person in them who park there all day. So therefore, even people who live there can't park there. And if you had a business and you wanted to park there at the front for an hour or two, you couldn't because there's no car parks. I think that's the area we need to look at with the traffic movement and the concerns. Possibly like another area in Pakenham, we might get some time car parking on one side of the road for a couple of hours, and then the other side would, on the Avan side, well, we could have a look at that. But at least then people would use it, would be more than one car use it for the whole day. Anyway, I think there is solutions here. I think both places can coexist quite well, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other speakers on this subject, for or against? No other speakers. I will go back to the mover, to Councillor Ryan, to sum up. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, through you, and thank you to my fellow councillors for supporting this. It's only in support, basically, so that everyone has that clarification of how many cars spaces are allotted to per factory. And again, Councillor Ross, you did bring up an interesting point that I have spoken to the officer in reference to about parking time limit for Avan. It is quite congested there, and there have been many accidents on the corner of Webster Way and Bald Hill Road. So it's something that needs to be looked at, and we don't want people in the community not wanting to go there and take their business there, because that's not what this is about. This is about where the confusion was, and I needed to clarify this so that there won't be any arguments between anybody and there will be respect. And as I said, these are more senior people that will be going to this place of worship. So the chances of really having children there is going to be quite limited from what I've been assured of. And I have to take it from face value from what all the concerned people involved in this had brought to me. So I'm about trying to solve the problem, not trying to create a problem. And when considering a place of worship, we try to have them located in a non-residential area and not in our green wedge zone. Commercial and industrial areas which have direct access to roads that they are capable of carrying traffic volumes are preferred, which this site ticks the boxes. I've heard the objections and concerns, I've read them. However, the conditions on the permit are quite stringent and restrictive, and the amount of people at the time people can attend the place of worship, therefore the uses can occur together with a minimum impact. And I'll leave it at that, Mayor. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, you've heard the debate by our councillors here this evening. We'll signify in the usual manner. All those for the motion? Carried. Before I start with item 6, I would just like to explain something's happening in the council chamber this evening. Councillor Jodie Owen has got a slight injury and may have to stand now and again to stand in the corner for a moment. It's not because she's been bad, it's because we've got to put her in the corner And I was just worried about the nervous man from Narnagoon who was a bit concerned about why you were standing near him. So I just want to explain that to the gallery that Councillor Jodie Owen is just a bit of an injury, but we'll leave it at that. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item 6. Item 6 is My Place Youth Facility Expansion and Relocation Project, Site Options, as withdrawn by Councillor Michael Schilling. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation that Council approve the My Place facility to be built at 41 James Street, Pakenham, in order to meet the needs of young people, increase specialist support services locally, and meet the timelines required under the Growth Suburbs Fund.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jeff Springfield. Back to you, Councillor Schilling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Springfield. This is a very exciting development for the young people of our Shire. Opened in 2012, the current My Place Youth facility has well and truly outgrown its premises on Main Street, Pakenham. Over the years, Council has been successful at attracting a multitude of services to that facility, as well as continuing to run successful programs which do cater for the diverse needs of our Shire's youth population. And whilst My Place and its partners have provided a wraparound service model to thousands of residents, it's well and truly time for an upgrade. Council has allocated $1.5 million to build a new facility, and that was in our current 2019-2020 budget. Furthermore, Council has been successful in its advocacy to the federal government during the last election period to attract another $1.5 million. So that's come through as part of an election promise. We've done some initial costings, and to build a new youth centre will cost $5.5 million. So Council is now applying for additional funds through the state government's Growing Suburbs Fund. And in order for us to be able to fulfil the requirements to access that money, Council are required to have a comprehensive search for a parcel of land that will be accessible for our Shire's youth to be able to access. And an important factor in selecting a block of land is it needs to be able to cater for a state-of-the-art facility and accommodate for rapid population growth, as well as we've discussed at length tonight about the population growth. As mentioned in my opening line, this land is located at 41 James Street, Pakenham. Now, as residents might be aware, this land is currently a gravel car park. This block consists of 3 titles. The proposed new centre will be located on the southernmost aspect of the block, which will utilise 100 square metres of that car park, so definitely not its entirety. Yes, initially that will result in a overall loss of parking. However, council surveys have showed that the block on average reaches a 60% occupancy rate. That combined with a part of this package of works would be to seal that car park as well and put proper lines through it, which will increase the capacity of parking. Councillors might also recall, as a part of the Pakenham car parking strategy, this car park is actually destined to become a multi-deck park, and we'll be partly funding that through a parking overlay, which applies to parts of our activity centre in Pakenham. I think this is a great outcome for our Shire. As I said, the current space is well and truly over capacity, and it reached that 12 months ago. So meaning that we're unable to bring any more increased services or new services to the Main Street site. And so far they include youth support and advocacy services around drugs and alcohol, Ways housing support. We have a Centrelink community engagement officer, Monash Health youth and family counsellor, a task force, community agency, Skills Plus, and the list goes on. So look, this is a great location. It's close to public transport. It's not far from the other facility, and it sits in a hub within the Shire that, combined with outreach service, should be great for young people across the entire Shire. So I hope councillors support this important development tonight to allow council to submit that application to the Growing Suburbs Fund to be able to bridge that gap in funding that we're currently facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Councillor Springfield, seconded to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Schilling. Look, I fully support him with the officer's recommendation of this site at 41 James Street. It's a wonderful facility that we have at My Place, but it needs upgrading, as Councillor Schilling pointed out. And in order to do that successfully, we really are hopefully going to get some more funding from the state government to match the federal funding and our own funding. If this goes through, this is only the first steps of seeing this to light. But once it is completed, it's going to be a wonderful thing for us to deliver more services to our youth. And we're an expanding community at Pakenham Central especially, and it's going to be more and more utilised in the future. So I fully support this motion and hope that my fellow councillors will also see fit to support it too. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Brett Owen, and then to Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Also history, this used to be the old Pakenham Courthouse, this site was the Pakenham Police Station, second version of the police station, and now council bought this land and other parcels along James Street for car parking. And we cannot forget car parking is very important, and this site, these three sites, will assist with providing that long-term car parking, particularly for our shop owners and staff that work at shops in the Main Street vicinity, the Pakenham Major Activity Centre. So this will be a long-term parking, and it'll be great as part of this that we'll seal those car parks. Really important. I'm of the opinion that this car park can be busy. I've seen it when you've got the senior citizens having their activities, and this is a location that the Shire says for long-term parking people should go. So we need to deliver to improve this car parking. Great to see a upgraded youth facility. Back in 2012, I was a strong fan of this. I was on the youth committee that saw this delivered. I was the youngest councillor at the time. I'm definitely not the case now. Probably one of the older ones now, but it is great that we will improve access to services. At the same time, delivering this dedicated sealed car park. We'll obviously do further investigations about those deck car parking and when that will occur and how that will be funded, but this will be a great result, getting a great youth facility and also assist with addressing car parking issues in Pakenham, sealing them so people can definitely use them. That'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. As I thank my fellow councillor, Councillor Schilling, for the hard work that he does with the youth, I'm unfortunately going to be against this, mainly because my concerns are the expense and the shortfall of 2.5 million that we have to find for the youth centre for it to go ahead. Again, I have a lot to do with the senior citizens, and yes, that car park can be quite full at times, but there's also, we talk about our shoppers and what we had discussion in our first item, and that is utilised there for workers using that as a parking spot. And so we have to look at that as well. I've also written down that would there be a possibility of extending upstairs to the house in my place? I'm not sure if that's possible, but I'm asking the question. And yes, it's close to PB Ronald Park, but then seniors have, sometimes they struggle to walk the distance. Our youth can walk a lot further. So public transport, and there's two other areas of consideration as well. And so I suppose one of the things that I'm concerned about is that there was money spent for an upgrade of renovations to the place called the Chapel, which is now called the Point, which is on the corner of the Main Street and I'm not sure the road. McGregor Road, thank you. And that was, reading through the report, it's only for an interim. So my concern is, I've asked the question, how much was used to do those renovations? As yet, I will be waiting for that. So when we put money into one thing in one area and we don't even it out, who misses out? And as much as I am all for the services, I think it's wonderful, and I really appreciate everything that happens for our youth, because they deserve to be looked after. And it is a growing area, but so is everyone else growing in the area. It's not just one group. My concern is that, one of the areas that was being looked at or considered, the response from the youth was they don't feel safe going past Burke Park. Well, that's used mainly by the youth. And it's quite safe now because we have cameras there. We have continual people checking over there. The lighting is really good. And, can we say that about seniors, that they don't feel safe? We can use the same excuses. I just would like to see a nice balance. And my concern is, where is the shortfall? How are we going to fund that shortfall? Yes, we've got to advocate for that. But at this stage, I'm not going to agree with this policy at the moment. I'm sorry, Councillor Schilling, but we'll see in the future if I keep supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors to speak on this subject? Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I too have concerns about this proposal. What I am concerned about is that there's a whole host of services that are provided at this location, and the reasons being to have a bigger premises is that more services could be provided. Without saying what those services would be, there's a whole host of them here which were read out before, which is a good dozen plus. What we're doing, we're going to say we're going to build something without any quantification, no requirements definition, no needs analysis. We all know that the youth need looking after, etc. But I would expect something like this. You'd be saying that these are the programs we provide. These are the programs we can provide if we got more space. This is how many times it's used and by whom. The current site, in my opinion, is the best site for it, without going down to James Street, which can be preserved. We're talking modular construction buildings at recreation reserves now, which are built in a factory and taken out and bolted together and put up at a location. That current site is ideal for a multi-storey building that could be produced off-site, brought and put together in about a month. And they display it, and they build hospitals, and they're now building schools like that. They're cheaper and they're easily put together and done. So the thing that I'm really concerned about is there doesn't seem to be any quantification on the extra services that we're going to provide, for the amount of money we're going to spend, who's going to use the services and how many people, the staffing levels going to go through the roof, and mainly that we can preserve that James Street site for better things later on. We can still do the car park there if council deems that necessary, but to go ahead with these projects without seeing requirements, definitions, and needs analysis and all the basic things that you need to make these decisions, I'm afraid I can't vote for this. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. People know that youth are our future. And if we don't invest in them, what's going to happen? That's your future. If you don't invest in something, if you've got a car and you don't invest in your car and get it serviced and look after it, it's going to break down. And you have a look at young people today, the amount of pressures that are on them. Education at school, if you don't make it all the way through to year 12, some people deem you as a failure. Employment's really tough. The middle jobs out there to earn money in the middle aren't there anymore that used to be there with GMH and all these sort of things when I was younger. You got housing prices where some of them view the world as they'll never be able to afford a house. When you have a look at some of the pressures in social media that have never been there ever before like today, you just can't escape. And for people to say, oh, you just don't have a phone, don't have one. Well, that's like cutting an arm off to a young person. They are always approachable and they have pressures that most people wouldn't understand. And do you know what? They need someone there to help them out. They need someone there to be able to support them. I must say, federal government doesn't have a defining area that they look after youth. State government doesn't do it either. And on this council, when I first got on, we just got a bus and the bus went out to the outer areas to build relationships with the young people, to let them know that someone did support them with services. And I can remember when we bought the kindergarten to turn into my place. And I can tell you, half the battle of bringing services out to an area is having spaces for them to be in. If there's no spaces, a lot of them can't afford to pay commercial rent. But if council have got spaces, they'll move into it. The day my place opened, nearly every space in there was already filled with services that came out. And you talk about the whole of Shire benefiting. If you can bring a service to Pakenham where there's 56,000 people, very soon 82, everywhere else benefits. Gembrook, Cockatoo, Emerald, Bunyip, Garfield, Narnagoon, Cooeyrup, Lang Lang, Beaconsfield and Officer, they will all benefit because what happens is they base themselves there and then they go out for half a day out there and half a day out there and half a day out there. But if they're based in Dandenong, they don't go to all those places. So you need to give the space that these services can come to. And when you have a look at this, we've actually got a perfect storm at the moment because we had an election. There's $1.5 million coming from the federal government. Council's had to redo it because basically my space is now too small for everything that we need to do there and have the services. And there's an opportunity with the Growing Suburbs Fund to get $2.5 million out of the state to help build it. So basically council puts in 1.5 out of 5.5 to build the place. What this will do, this will bring the services. And I agree with some of my councillors, our demographic is changing. At the moment, we've got a lot of young people in primary schools. They will become youth and they will need help, and they need help in transition because there aren't the mentors that there used to be. People are really busy today. They're spending all their time at work. They drive in and out of the place. They've got no time and brain space when they get home, and their kids want to have a chat to them, but they're really busy. So, you know, my place is so important that they've got someone to go and talk to. And our team, I must say, do an unbelievably great job to know the relationships between those kids in the schools and how they're going. And I must say, in future, this will happen with our seniors too. We're going to go from 18% to 25% in the next 20 years. So therefore, those people will need more money invested with them as well. And that will change because we're going through a transition where we build all of our recreational facilities and our sporting facilities where they've got something to do. But as people get older, they need different things. They need more other options out there, like new senior centres and different things like that. But at the moment, we have a growing population here of youth who urgently need help. And if we can give it, and we only have to put in 1.5 out of 5.5, I reckon that's a really good result. So I look forward to this going through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors to speak on this subject? No other speakers. Before I go back to the mover, Councillor Schilling, I'd just like to make an observation that, of course, councillors' lives would be a lot easier if we didn't have cars to drive or park anywhere, wouldn't it? Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor. That's very true. So just to clarify, yes. So this block of I respect all councillors' opinions. So this tonight isn't to approve the funding for a new My Place facility. Essentially, this is just about council being able to submit an application to the Growing Suburbs. And please correct me if I'm wrong, officers. This is for us to submit an application to the Growing Suburbs Fund, so we're able to bridge that gap of funding. So I'm not bringing to council tonight that we build a youth facility with a funding shortfall of 2.5 million. The idea of bringing this tonight is to allow our officers to prepare a grant application for the Growing Suburbs Fund. And in terms of some of the data around the services that we need and services that are waiting to come to the Shire, I don't think I'd be able to disclose that because it's in commercial confidence having publicly listing services that are waiting to come. But I'm sure confidentially we would be able to get a report quite easily from the officers of the services that are actually waiting to enter the Shire. There is a waiting list for meeting space room at My Place, and there has been so for 12 months. So council assessed the current site as not being of an appropriate size. Yes, we have lists of services waiting to move into our facilities to support our people, and the funding shortfall is only there because we need to prepare this application through council tonight so we can apply for the money. I'd like to also thank the staff down at the facility, as Councillor Ross did, who do an amazing job, Emma and her team, in supporting young people and who have also put in a lot of hard work into the advocacy for this project. So I hope councillors will support this tonight, remembering that it is just for us to prepare a funding application so we can bridge the gap and then build the facility if we're successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Okay, councillors, you've heard the debate as we've... Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown. Point of... Yep. So it's... I accept your point of order. So if you're going to use a point of order, that's okay. I'll accept that because it's more than just a funding application. That's what you're referring to. The motion. The site. That's correct. Correct. Councillor Schilling, I'll go back to you to explain.
Certainly. So the site, you're correct, Councillor Brown. So the site that would be used would be 41 James Street.
So it's not just a funding application?
Well, what we would need to do to fulfil the $2.5 million.
It's all right. Just close.
Two and a half.
Thanks, Tom. Just hold fire for a moment, Councillor. Thanks. Tom has gone out. Tom and Peter. Peter's about 6'8", so we'll go back to you, Councillor Schilling. Sorry, I interrupted you for that moment. Good point, Councillor Brown. I must admit. Back to you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor.
Before we go to the vote, thank you.
No, definitely. It's good to seek any clarification so we can make sure we get this 100% right. Acknowledge the recommendation, but my understanding behind this report was that we're giving the officers permission to write a application to the Growing Suburbs Fund, and for that we need to list a site for that to occur. If there's any council officers through you, Mayor, that would like to clarify that.
Can we clarify that? Before we go to the vote, I'd like to this clarified, please. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you are correct in your assumption in that for us to be able to lodge an application under the Growing Suburbs Fund, we do need to nominate a site. We could certainly, if Councillor Brown has concerns about the recommendation, I would suggest that we could alter it slightly to indicate that it's nominating a site for the Growing Suburbs Fund application. So we could certainly reword the recommendation in such a way.
I would support the application for funding.
Yep.
Okay, so the motion's already been cast, so we need to vote on the actual motion, Councillor Schilling's motion, which is already here. It's already written. So we've heard the debate. I want to ask the question. All those in favour? For? Carried. Okay, we'll move on to item 8. What are you going to do? Yeah, we're just going to hold fort for a sec. Doug? I will suspend this council if we have any more disruptions. I will stop and we will just stop and we'll all go. Okay, we can talk about this later, but we can't talk about it now. It can't be debated in this chamber. I will not allow it in this chamber. Okay, that's okay. Thank you. Councillor Wilmot. Yes, we'll have an open discussion here all of a sudden. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the recommendation that the Cockatoo Community Hall Committee, appointed under the provisions of Section 86 of the Local Government Act by Council Resolution dated the 19th of May 2008, be dissolved.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Springfield. Back to you, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. And it brings me no joy at all to move this motion tonight, but it's a necessary thing. This Hall Committee, over the last few years, although they had a full committee at their last BGM, has unfortunately suffered the loss of a lot of members through illness and other family issues. So it's basically come down to just two people running this hall at the moment. And these two people have been part of this hall committee for around about 30 years. They can't actually remember when they joined it so long ago. But they've done a terrific job, as have all of the past committee members. It's not an easy thing running a community hall and having to have the keys available to people, meet people on site to show them the building, etc., etc., clean it, make sure it's clean for the next people. It's a difficult job, and they've put in a lot of dedication over the years. So I thank them for their commitment, because it is a big task. As I said, these two ladies that have been keeping the hall going over the last couple of years have done a terrific job. But earlier this year, our audit committee, the external auditors, requested some paperwork as part of their audit process, and unfortunately the committee couldn't produce that paperwork. And because of that, it's recognised as a risk to council, being that it's a Section 86 committee and therefore basically a subcommittee of council. So we've had to come to this conclusion. The Community Development Officer, Tim Cooper, and I, over the years, we've had a number of meetings with this committee to try and boost their numbers and boost the support that we've been providing for them. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to get there. So we met with them just a couple of weeks ago, and to be honest, I think the two ladies are a little bit relieved that we've come in and helped them work through this process. Certainly one of the ladies has expressed to me a number of times since that she's very pleased that she won't have the stress of this committee anymore. So the next step forwards is that council will look to different models. Maybe there's a new committee formed, maybe it's an external provider that can manage the hall for us. There's a number of options, but we'll be starting some conversations with a couple of different groups that are already existing within the community and already providing services. So the hall function won't stop, it'll still be operating. The regular users will still be using it as they have been all the way along. Anybody that's got a booking will still go ahead with their function. It's just that the committee itself will no longer exist until we get the next model up and running. So again, I just want to say thank you to the committee. They've done a terrific job, and I'm sure they'll still continue to be active community members for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Seconder to speak, Councillor Springfield. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Wilmot. I support her comments fully. It is difficult being community members trying to run, committees, hall committees, the committees for recreational reserves and such. It's all volunteer based, and to tick all the checks and balances at times can be difficult. I think this is going to be the best move forward for everyone concerned. And it will help see this site rejuvenated to a degree in the future for future uses and expand upon its current usage. And I think it'll work better for everyone involved. But again, I would like to support Councillor Wilmot in her comments that these people are to be commended for the work they've put into the past, as are all our community members that are involved in committees of this type, that dedicate their volunteer hours to trying to make the community work as best we can for our communities. So thank you, Mayor.
Well said, councillors, both councillors. Anyone else to speak on this subject? No. Okay, we'll signify in the usual manner. All those for the motion. Oh, sorry, councillor. No. I will go back to Councillor Wilmot. No, sorry. I'll go back to you. That's all right, Mayor.
I'll forgive you. We've had a little disruption tonight and it's thrown everybody. But I have nothing further to say. Thank you.
After all that. Thank you, councillor. We've heard the council speak. All those in favour of the item? For? Carried. Thank you. and thank you for your allowances. Item 9. We're going to the Growing Suburbs Fund 2019 applications as withdrawn by Councillor Colin Ross. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation that the following Growing Suburbs Fund 2019 applications in priority order from the highest to the lowest be endorsed. Number 1, My Place. Number 2, Integrated Child and Family Centre at Timbertop Ricks Road, Pakenham Main Street upgrade, Beaconsfield Memorial Park, Cooirup Community and Bowls Facility, and Officer District Park.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I have a seconder, please, for that? Councillor Brett Owen. Back to you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For those who don't know what the Growing Suburbs Fund is, every year, it's a year-by-year basis, but there's a thing called the Growing Suburbs Fund, which is given to interface councils, which are the councils around the outer rim of the urban growth boundary in Victoria. And that area has 50% of all Victoria's population increase comes to these councils, which we are one of. And these people vie for the $50 million every year in infrastructure projects. And in the last 4 rounds of $50 million, Cardinia Shire has benefited to the tune of, in the first round, in 15-16, the Heatherbray Reserve Pavilion, $2 million, and IYU soccer facility and playgrounds, 3.2. So we got 5.2 million that time. In round 2, we got the Growth Corridor District Playground, 700,000, Deep Creek Reserve, 2.8, and Eastern Ranges Trail, 545,000, which was a bit over 4 million. In the third year, we got the Cardinia Cultural Centre redevelopment, which you'll see opening very soon, $3 million. The Hills Hub at Emerald, 1.5 million, and James Bath Community and Sports Pavilion, $500,000. And then the last round, we got Cumley Banks Community and Sports Pavilion, 3.5, and Gembrook Leisure Park, about 500,000, and that totals $18.25 million, which comes out at about $4.5 million a year. I can remember talking to our ex-CEO, Mr. Gary McQuillan, about rate capping and saying that, and he said to me, as long as we can get some money for infrastructure that can be built from the state government or somewhere, we can actually afford to have a rate cap. And he said about $4 million, if we could get that every year, he said that would help us. So therefore, since the rate capping's been in, we've actually had record numbers of capital projects done during that time. We've had $4 million a year. And as I read out, I wanted to read those out because the whole Shire benefits from the urban growth boundary. People think they don't, but actually a lot of the money, and we can, if we get more money coming in because we're a growing suburb, Shire, we can spread the money out further. So it just sort of goes to show where the money can go to. And I must say, myself and the Mayor met the other week and we went to Parliament with the Interface Council group, which is made up of all these councils. And we were lobbying that basically $50 million doesn't buy what it used to buy, with the CPI in construction going up at least 6%. So we've lobbied to get $55 million put into this fund so it will grow with that. And we met with the state government, with the opposition and all the minor parties. So that's something that we do go and do. I must say this program is a wonderful program. What it allows council to do is move projects forward, projects that normally wouldn't be done. If we had 6 projects to do, we could probably only afford to do 4 of them, but we might be able to do 6 with the extra money. So we're getting things done every year. So if you have that for, say, 4 years, you're getting 8 projects done in advance. So anyway, I think this is a really good program. Council quite often, was going to build these things anyway. So what we can do is the money we would have spent on all of them, we can spread over into another project. So anyway, I just want to have my fellow councillors hopefully support these options. I know they've been talked about all the councillors and their wards and what things I'd like to see happen and what's a priority. Anyway, I look for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I'll go to Councillor Brett Owen to second the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ross. As you said, this fund is essential for us to deliver the much needed infrastructure for our Shire. I just wanted to comment on some of the projects that are listed as priorities. Obviously, we discussed my place. Integrated Child and Family Centre at Timbertop or Ricks Road. I really hope this will be at Timbertop. I know there's some issues with land, etc., but it's really important that we deliver it in Timbertop Estate because that's in the Officer Structure Plan. People have bought into Timbertop, knowing that there's going to be a kindergarten in this estate, so it's really important. Hopefully, we resolve that so we can deliver a kindergarten in Timbertop Officer. Pakenham Main Street upgrade. $1 million. We've talked about Main Street shops, and we need to improve Main Street. So that would be a great project if we are lucky enough to get the money. Beaconsfield Memorial Park, this is where the cenotaph is. It's fair to say it would welcome a improvement, rejuvenation in this area, and I know that the Beaconsfield Progress Association is excited about a future project involving that, so it'd be great to bring forward that with a success, hopefully. And obviously Kirirup Community Bowls Facility, which I'm sure other people might talk about. But it is a really important grants program. We thank the state government for it. We hope they continue to commit to this fund for the life of this government. It's really important because we won't be able to do the many things without this fund. And also the Officer and District Park, I know it's lower down the list as priorities, but that's also a very important project. So I just want to thank our officers, councillors and mayors in relation to the advocacy in relation to this fund. I think we've got some really good runs on the board. We've got good relationships with the government. So that holds us in good light, when we apply for these grants. So I fully support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors speaking on that subject? Before I go back to Councillor Ross, I'd like to also say that, of course, our CEO, Carol Jeffs, has had a lot to do with this in particular item. And I want to thank Carol for being there. I know in this particular spot it's been a big job to do. I'll go to Councillor Ross to sum up. Thanks, Councillor.
I think I've just about exhausted the merits of the fund. It does allow us to keep rates at the cap and the CPI without putting too much pressure on other things. So therefore, everybody benefits. Your rates are down and you get more facilities built. Anyway, I ask my fellow councillor for support for this lineup of applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. All those councillors in favour? For? Carried. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. The night's getting up. No, it's still getting on, isn't it? Item 16. Notice of motion 1048 as withdrawn by Councillor Michael Schilling. Councillor Schilling, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move my notice of motion, which resolves to note that the Municipal Association of Victoria State Council, May 2019, and the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly have both declared a climate emergency. To declare a climate emergency to the overwhelming climate science, which indicates rising global temperatures are putting our local economy, people, species, and ecosystem at risk. Give priority to policy and actions that will provide for both mitigation and adaptation in response to accelerating global warming and climate change. Ensure that the climate change adaptation and mitigation are emphasised as a key priority in the 2021 to 2025 Council Plan. Investigate the financial viability of divestment within council financing with the aim of moving away from financial institutions that fund the fossil fuel industry. Fund a climate change action plan in the 2020 to 2021 budget cycle with a focus on climate change, adaptation and mitigation. Investigate the cost effectiveness in purchasing green energy and acknowledge the work of Cardinia Shire Council that what we've already done to move towards a zero carbon operational target with a planned 36% reduction in community emissions by 2024.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Carol Ryan. Back to you, Councillor Schilling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ryan, for seconding this notice of motion. You don't have to delve far into the literature to see the dramatic impact climate change is having both locally and globally. Of course, this is a multifaceted issue which impacts on everyone in some way or another. This notice of motion is designed to enhance Council's already progressive climate change targets, whilst at the same time is geared towards protecting our community in the form of mitigation and adaptation. Councillors and residents would have seen a number of councils declaring climate emergencies. This action, as listed in my notice of motion, is an incredibly important aspect as it raises the profile of climate change. And this action is in line with the Municipal Association of Victoria, State Council, May 2019, and also the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly. Some might say our advocacy on this issue is only a small drop in the ocean and won't result in any net change. I would argue the benefits of collective advocacy across government, not-for-profit and private industry will be instrumental in ensuring we're able to lobby for effective climate action. After all, it was the UN General Assembly that recently announced that we have approximately 11 years left until there is irreversible damage to our planet. When writing this notice of motion, declaring a climate emergency to me alone doesn't provide council with any measurable actions or tools to deal with the increased frequency of extreme weather events or safeguard the organisation against the possibility of successive councils who may not recognise the local environment as being a significant issue. And I do note in our recent workshops, this council has placed the environment as being a significant issue to us all. That is why I've included some key points to this around funding a climate action plan in the 2020 budget cycle. Councillors may remember that we were briefed by the environment team some weeks back, and we know as part of the Council's aspirational energy target is the implementation of a climate action plan. And this is a basic plan around how we help communities adapt to extreme weather events which we're facing more regularly. The cost to Council approximately would be around $40,000 for this plan to be completed in the next budget cycle. Given some of the damning economic modelling around climate change, as referred to by multiple journals, one in particular, the effect of climate change on GDP by country and global economic gains from complying with the Paris Climate Accord, has Australia losing $130 billion of GDP annually by the year 2100. And of course, this cost is incremental starting now. In addition to this report, a recent study by the Climate Council states that $571 billion will be wiped off the Australian property market, $19 billion lost to the agricultural sector, from the agricultural sector, I should say, $221 billion spent on repairing infrastructure damaged by extreme weather, and all this is set to occur by the year 2030 if we don't meet our Paris targets. The point I'm trying to make is inaction is incredibly expensive. And of course, this climate plan will work towards measurable outcomes and actions to help the community adapt to these extreme weather events such as fire and floods, and which we know in Cardinia, due to our diverse landscape of having the area around Kui Rup being quite a wet area, and then we have the Dandenong Ranges and heading up Port Ward, we know we are prone to these extreme weather events. Whilst I've acknowledged the work Council has already undertaken to steer this organisation to become carbon neutral in its operations by 2024, and our plan to see community emissions decrease by 36% in that same year, this is very much putting a local lens on our action. And this is exactly what we're here to do as a local government, is to look after our community. But looking a bit deeper, I believe we need to look at some of the broader ramifications of our council operations. And that is why this notice of motion is only requesting a report into the financial costs of divestment. Councillors would have seen in their financial reports, which were in this month's General Council meeting notes, that we spend approximately $2 million each year in interest on our council debts. In this report, I'm seeking to find out which financial institutions our debts are with and whether those institutions fund fossil fuel or environmentally damaging activities. If they do, I'm requesting Council do a cost analysis on the viability of transferring that debt and developing policy to not draw funds from organisations that support the fossil fuel industries. And from the discussions I've had, I believe this could be reached at either being cost neutral to the organisation or even delivering a saving to Council. After all, we might be able to say in 2024 through our actions that we're carbon neutral in our operations. However, are we inadvertently funding projects that could be detrimental to other municipalities' environments? And if asked tonight, I'd like to see that report come back to Council for our further consideration. So that aspect of the notice of motion isn't committing Council to anything other than a report. This notice of motion is also consistent with our council plan, which we've all endorsed as a council. Specifically point 3.3.1, which states that we must adapt to the impacts of climate change by working in partnerships with the South East Council's Climate Change Alliance and both the Australian and Victorian governments. As a council, we have a responsibility to make decisions now that will positively impact current and future generations of the Shire. We need to be able to look into the eyes of families, friends and communities and say that as councillors we did our best to protect our future. And when it comes to protecting our environment, there is no place for shifting responsibility. Ensuring a safe climate is everyone's business, and I hope councillors will be able to support this notice of motion tonight to further equip council and deal with the challenges of an ever-changing climate in our Shire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Second to speak, Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Very informative, as usual. I enjoyed reading this report. I'm not going to respond too much on it other than I'm going to support your motion on the Climate Change Action Plan. I think it's really important that we consider about the droughts that the farmers have had, the fires that we've had within our Shire, and how well our teams have worked within our Shire. So it means that they've got really great action plans, and I commend them highly, because without the team, some of the people wouldn't have got through what they had to get through with the fires. So in reference to this report, I'll look forward to it coming back to council and find out more about what's involved in it, but I'm in total support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Could I have any other speakers? Councillor Jodie Allen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. For my day job, we are currently trying to teach young people exactly what a changing climate means, and it's a scary, scary place. I recently had 5 of my students who were, they're only year 8, they're high achievers, so they're the best and brightest, and sadly next year I lose them to Nossal. But I know they had contact here with council in relation to garbage services and how that was processed and all the questions they have. It's brilliant to see, because you know, if we can get 12 and 13-year-olds really starting to understand that the world we have now, we've stuffed up to a degree. Our parents, sadly, have done that a little bit more. So what we need to do is do everything we can now to reclaim Earth and make it a better place for those who are younger and for those who have not even been thought of being born yet. So I'm fully behind Councillor Schilling getting this report back, because the fact is we can dream and fantasise about there being life on other planets. The fact is we live here on Earth, and us as humans have damaged our beautiful planet, and we need to now take steps to try and, we can't recover everything, but we certainly can try and protect our biomes, our species and other things that are vital to us remaining on Earth and being in the environments that are fit and healthy for us to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers on the subject? Councillor Springfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to my other councillors, and especially thank you to Councillor Schilling for bringing this forward. You know, if history tells us anything, I think as a human race, we're really good at recognising the mistakes of our past when it's too late to do anything about it. And we say we should have done something better back then. We shouldn't have participated in that. We should have treated people of different ethnicities better. We should have done this and done that. It's very easy to, you know, let's not try. I hope as a world we don't make that mistake on climate change, because as it stands, we've been talking about this for a number of years. People have brought it up decades and decades ago of what would happen if we just continue to, you know, to spew our pollution into the air and into the oceans, and to reduce, you know, land clearing and to reduce our vegetation, you know, and we take for granted the clean air that we breathe and the life that we exist on this earth in the biosphere that we share with the rest of the planet. So I hope we don't get to a point in 1,000 years' time when we're all living in bubbles and we say, well, we should have done it differently when it's too late. So I thank you for bringing this forward, because, you know, I think it's very poignant for council to make a statement on this, and we should be doing something different. We have the technology in place to act differently. right now across the world we have the technology in place. The only argument against it is the cost effectiveness of such things, you know. But there will be a point in the future when they'll say it'll be priceless to have done the right thing, rather than argue about what's going to cost you more dollars per kilowatt hour in the present day. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I hope fellow councillors will support this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilmot, then Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Schilling, for putting this notice of motion forward and for opening up this very important topic for discussion. You have my total support for this motion, and I believe that it is the right time for this council to make this declaration of a climate emergency. The key findings in the annual Climate of a Nation report, which was released on the 9th of September by the Australian Institute, clearly shows that the attitude of everyday Australians toward climate change is changing. 81% of Australians are concerned that climate change will result in more droughts and floods. That's up from 78% in 2018. 78% of Australians are concerned climate change will lead to water shortages in our cities. That's up from 67% in 2017 and 72% in 2018. 64% of Australians think Australia should have a national target for net zero emissions by 2050, and only 15% think we shouldn't. 54% of Australians reject the idea that Australia should not act on climate change until other major emitters like the US and China do. In a recent report published in June of this year by the National Centre for Climate Restoration, they stated that by June 2019, more than 600 governments in 13 countries had recognised or declared a climate emergency. When I checked the most recent figures yesterday, they have increased and they now stand at 1,008 governments, which most of them are local governments, in 19 different countries have now declared a climate emergency. So this is not just something that's happening in Australia, this is a global movement. The purpose of declaring a climate emergency is to accelerate sustained and meaningful action by all levels of government. Local councils and communities have an indispensable role in advocating to state and federal governments to increase their actions to address global warming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must say, when I first got onto this council 11 years ago, there was only two councillors, myself and Councillor Owen, who actually did believe in climate change. Everybody else didn't believe in it at the time. We didn't have mobile phones either. Council didn't have a mobile phone, so we said, you've got to get a mobile phone. What's a mobile phone? The Mayor said of the day. He said, I won't even know how to turn the thing on. He got the box and lifted it up. So we've come a really long way. I'm really proud to say that our councillors have moved along progressively as time has gone on. And when you have a look at the issue of climate change, whether or not people believe how much contribution man makes to it, or whether we're in a 500-year cycle of things, the climate getting worse, we are responsible to do something in this space. And some people will argue that, what can we do? What we do is fruitless. Well, have a look at the CFCs. I remember there was a hole in the ozone layer that was spoken about, and every country bar one got rid of CFCs in their sprays. So therefore it closed up. So it actually shows that man can have an impact on things. And then other people who just want to talk about finances, well, I'd say to them, well, have a look at what we do with our sewage and that. We treat it and we pump it out in the ocean and it's Class A water. We don't even use it for food. Other countries around the world, you could save money. Shut the plant down. We'll just do like other countries. We won't even process it and we'll just pump it out into the ocean or whatever. And they go, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. That's terrible. You say, well, we actually do have a social conscience in this area, and deep down we do know that we should be doing good things with the environment that we've got. I believe in Cardinia Shire, from what I've seen, we are good citizens and good custodians. We've got a carbon sink, which we've had for years, which is a forest that was created by council to suck in some of the carbon. Since I've been on council, we've got lighting that we change all our street lights. Now, at first, to get that through on the first council I was on, you couldn't actually argue that it was good for the environment. You could argue that it was going to save us money. So therefore, and you get your money back within so many years. So you could win them over on that level and say, well, we'll put the lights in, but we'll save it in 3 years. We'll save money. So anyway, that was really good. We've gone to solar panels everywhere. We're trying to get zero emissions down to zero. and that's a really good thing. So you'll see on all our facilities we've got solar panels, and we're even looking into a solar farm somewhere in Cardinia Shire. So we're trying to search out what the opportunities are there. I must say this motion today really does take a next step in what we're doing. I think it is a really good move. It doesn't send an emergency through us, because I believe that we really do acknowledge this space and we try and do what we can. And one of my questions was, what will this cost? And as Councillor Schilling said, a lot of it's in our budget anyway. I mean, if we've got a $100 million budget and we can't spare 30 or 40,000, which is mostly budgeted to try and move forward in this area, we're obviously doing something wrong. So anyway, I support this. Thank you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other speakers on this subject? Before I go to the mover, Councillor Schilling, I'd like to say, whilst I believe in climate change, as you know, and I'm a believer in this, my point would be that Cardinia Shire, we are one of the leaders in this area. We already do this. We're already up front. We're at a regional level. Cardinia Shire is a founding member of the South East Council Climate Change Alliance, which is called SECA. I'm the representative that goes there, and I see what they do. And we're involved. We're one of 8 councils that created this actual alliance. And collaboratively together, we respond and adapt to impacts of climate change. SECA are really a great leader. We spend $23,000 a year in that space to be a member of that alliance. And I think we do a really good job in that space. That's why I think we've already got it in place as a council. We're actively supporting investing resources in climate change initiatives. At a local level, the council aspirational energy transition plan. A lot of words, I know, but it means that we're doing something. We are doing a lot in that space. Chart mitigation actions, initiatives to reduce organisational and community emissions. And that's been stated already by my fellow councillor, Councillor Ross, that what we do in this space is a fantastic place. So I believe that we are advocates to our state and national governments in that space through SECA, and I think we already do a lot with our staff. Our staff are fantastic here in this space. I can't put them on a high enough pedestal when we talk about climate change and what we do recognise. And that's where we do already investments in around about 1,500 rooftop solar panels, just for instance. Environmental upgrades to our own facilities, as Councillor Ross said before. So I didn't want to speak on this subject, but I felt a need to speak at this particular time, because being the representative of us as councillors at SECA, I'm very strong in this spot where we are, because we really have got our own situation, and I don't want to declare this as an emergency, but that's just me. I think we're already doing it in that space, and so I don't want to be pushed into a corner just because a few people want to push us in that corner. But I think we're doing a great job in that space, Councillor. I will go back to you now, Councillor, to sum up. Thank you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And yes, I probably should have mentioned in my opening remarks that you are a representative of SECA, and I'm also incredibly proud to sell the achievements of our environment team. In my concluding comments, I did have a number of our environmental achievements, which I'm very grateful that other councillors have covered throughout their talks, because I don't think we could ever doubt that Cardinia are the leaders when it comes to local climate action. But best practice is always moving, best practice is always improving, and with any industry you can never remain stagnant, and it's always important to take things to the next level. Our environment team themselves have said the next stage to the aspirational energy target is having measurable actions through a climate change action plan. That's taking us to the next level again. That wasn't budgeted in next year's budget. By approving this tonight, we'll guarantee them the money to be able to take our council operations to that next stage. Divestment, yes, internally we're doing well, but just investigating what our impact is on other communities. And the report could come back that we have already, I know that we haven't already done that, otherwise I wouldn't have put it in my notice of motion tonight. But once we find out that impact, then we'll be able to chart our way forward with that. In terms of a climate emergency, we don't just have our own Shire municipal boundaries to worry about. We form part of a global. We're global citizens. We form part of planet Earth, and it's important that we look globally and really look at our impacts and how we advocate to the wider community, whether that be state government, federal government, our residents. So, look, I completely acknowledge some of the great work that council staff have done, but they can only do so much with a limited budget. This will give them that little bit of extra money and will show the greater community that we're serious on this issue and provide a great advocacy platform to state and federal governments that if enough people get together and do this, we might actually see some proper action, not just from us, but from higher up when it comes to climate change. So I'd like to thank everyone that spoke to this. I really do appreciate people's words and understanding around this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, all those in favour? For? Carried. There you are, Councillor, that was for you. Okay, that finishes the items for this evening that have been withdrawn. Can I have items not withdrawn? Can I have a mover for the items, please? Councillor Carol Ryan. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brown. All those in favour? For? Carried. Okay, let's move on. I note that several reports from various committees have been tabled in addition to the minutes of recent council briefing sessions, and these are available in any councillor wishes to view them. So councillors' reports we move to. Councillors, any matters to report? Councillor Jodie Owen. Sure.
Thanks, Mayor. I usually don't do this because it actually hasn't happened, but by the time it's happened for the next council meeting, it's actually not going to be sort of important. But I'd like to celebrate that on Saturday night this week, the 21st, that the Pakenham Pumas Baseball Club turns 20 years old. So they will be having their annual general meeting and awards night at Outlook, at the Outlook facility. So that should be really good. And a lot of people have no idea at how successful a Pakenham baseball team actually is, and we do really well in women's and all age groups and even men. So I'm really looking forward to going along to that evening, hoping that my body holds up till then, because it should be a good night, and I look forward to spending time with those people. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's not a report, it's an advert, isn't it? That's an advert, really. Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Carol Ryan, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, Councillor Owen, I'll be going to the same event, so I got the same invitation, which will be good. So we'll make sure you don't fall over and look after you at the best interest. I'd just like to thank the community for the blood bank. I do mention it every time the blood bank comes out, and we got more than our quota this time, so I thank the community for all the hard work that you do, because giving blood saves lives, and it's really important that we keep giving blood, and they come out on a regular basis. So I'll just let the community know whenever the blood bank comes out, and that's pretty much to my report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Any other reports? Councillor Brett Owen.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I was one of those who donated, and it was really great. The mobile blood banks in Pakenham for almost 2 weeks. The Red Cross loved this location, the Cardinia Cultural Centre, but yeah, for almost 2 weeks they were, receiving donations. So I believe the Inner Wheel and I think Pakenham Uniting Church were the volunteers to provide a yummy refreshment. So it was really good. Council is undertaking community consultation in relation to our playground renewals, and this is something I really love. And one of these playgrounds is Panorama. And there's other playgrounds that we're renewing, Narnagoon, Kennedy Road, Pakenham, Dick Jones Reserve, and also Officer Rec Reserve. So the surveys are on our website, have your say. So I encourage families particularly and the general community to have a look at that and provide feedback. I know that we're going to schools, kindergartens and childcare centres to gather that information from what young people want in these playgrounds. So that's a really good thing. Just want to thank. There was a bit of an emergency last month in relation to the Officer Public Hall. That was at risk of maybe closing down if there was no committee formed. So back on the 21st of August, there was a meeting and a committee, I think, of 11 members were elected. So that's really great. I just wanted to thank particularly the Van Stencil family who have, really ran that hall pretty much by themselves, bookings and so forth. And due to ill health, they had to sort of forego those duties. So I just want to particularly thank the Van Stencil family. They're amazing. Just remind the community that last council meeting we resolved to support the Upper Beaconsfield community in relation to a dangerous intersection of Beaconsfield Emerald Road, Salisbury Road, that intersection there. So there is a petition. It's currently still got 400 signatures, but that's still live, and I believe that's obviously in the township of Upper Beaconsfield. So I encourage people to sign that petition because we really need to improve that intersection. That petition will be tabled to the state government representatives, I think in November. So let's hope we get some results there. So council will continue to advocate and support that group. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to report that on the 28th of August, so last month, we were very pleased to launch our third program for the leadership program. So this is the third intake, and this year we had twice as many applicants as what the program can actually take, which is a really good result. And it just shows that by word of mouth, this program is very sought after, and certainly talking to some of the past participants, they absolutely value it. So I'm really pleased that that's gone ahead, and that was on, I think, the Wednesday night. Councillor Ross and the Mayor were both there, and then on the Saturday, Councillor Schilling and I had an opportunity to speak to them at their first session. So they're a really good team, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go. We've extended the length of the program this year. It used to be a 6-month program. It's now going to be a 10-month program. So again, that'll be good to see where they go at the end of that. On the 3rd and the 10th of this month, so just the last couple of weeks, Councillor Ryan and I have attended the Here For You bystander training for domestic abuse. This is a great program, and if councillors have the opportunity to participate in this, and I believe there's another course being run in November, I suggest you can do it if you can. If you've got the time and you don't have other commitments, it's a really good program. It really opens up your mind to look at things a little bit differently and gives you some really good skills on how to cope with situations if you suspect there's domestic abuse going on. So well worth doing. And I just want to do a shout out to the ladies in Gembrook who organise every year the Everything's Patchwork and Quilting Expo in Gembrook. This is the 6th year they've done it. It's a fundraising event for the local CFA, and they do a terrific job. This year it was hailing. It was a crappy day. But they had 30 traders that came from all over the place, and they had over 400 visitors turn up regardless of the really rotten weather. So I congratulate Glenys Gallagher and her small team. It is only a small team of about 5 or 6 people. They do a terrific job, and it was a great day yet again. And yes, I did spend money yet again. So congratulations to the girls.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors to report? Nope. I would like to just mention I've been to many events, but on yesterday, which is Sunday, I went to the Garfield North State School. Garfield North State School got burnt all around it. The trees were all burnt around, and it's a magnificent little state school, this Garfield North State School. You wouldn't even know it was there, but it's for mainly for young people with disabilities. It's a camp. It's a little camp they have there now. So all the trees were all burnt to the ground, and so we were there as the Cannibal Creek Land Care and our own community recovery committee were there as well for the recovery of that bushfire ravaged area. And they were there in force, and it was really great to see the Rotarians there cooking a barbecue up, and they're planting trees and replanting that area. Just shows you what can happen and how long it takes to get back together. So I was there and planted a few trees. But after that, I went to the lakeside. Lakeside, they had the Victorian Fisheries Authority were there having casting competitions and things with the young people there about fishing, all about fishing. If you know, many, many years ago, we had this fishing policy problem around Lakeside. And I was a great believer. I didn't want to actually bring that up because it was a long time ago. But I know the term, it's to fish or not to fish. That is the question, which is Shakespeare. And so it was a really great day to be. I know Councillor Brett Arm was there with his son Will. They're fishing away, and we released, I don't know how many, 500, I think it was 500 rainbow trout into that lake. And they do restock it now and again. So if there's a few anglers out there that want to give it a shot, there's some beautiful rainbow trout. And I'm sure there'll be some large ones in there for many years gone by. So it was really good to see it as an event, as a community event around Lakeside. And he was there, I'll thank my mother for the rabbits, was there. Rex Hunt was there. So he was around talking to the community, talking to all the kids. I don't think the kids knew who he was, by the way, but I didn't want to tell him that. But a lot of the older folk like I knew who he was, and he was a real character. But anyway, that's we'll move on. Right, we'll move on to presentation of petitions. Councillor Ross, I believe you have a petition to present. Would you like to read out the prayer? And
I actually took it round to Mr. Evans.
So Mr. Evans has a petition. Yep. Would you like to read the prayer, please?
I will, thank you.
Councillor Ross, thank you.
The reason for this petition, due to the traffic and parking problems on Cardinia Road at the intersection of Bellardo Road. At Cardinia Primary School, the amount of traffic during drop-off and pick-up times, combined with the potential for dangerous driving, is putting children and the community at risk. The action we are seeking is an upgrade in signage and improvement in parking conditions on Cardinia Road at Cardinia Primary School. And the bizarre thing is, when you read through this petition, most of the people who actually signed it are out of Central Ward, out of Pakenham, because a lot of people choose to drive their kids to that primary school. So when I got asked, I said, well, it's actually not in my ward. And they said, but we all live in your ward. So actually it was a really good point. And I directed them to have a chat with the ward councillors in the area, and they said they were actually in communication with them and with council. So anyway, I was happy to bring this along, and I'll leave it on the table for a month. I was going to move a motion about some other things, but I have to leave it on the table for a month. So I just present this to council. Thank you.
You do, councillor. That's all you can do. But there's those cars again. We've got those cars and car parks again, as I mentioned before. We have also a petition from Councillor Schilling. Would you like to table that and read the prayer, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So this petition probably isn't, we may have just done some of this work. So it's asking the Council to declare a climate crisis by declaring a state of climate emergency, committing to 100% renewable energy for council operations by 2025. We're going to beat that by a year. And committing to a target of net zero emissions for the community by 2040. This petition is from the Southeast Climate Action, who held a screening of 2040 in the community on Friday night, which is the latest documentary on the issue of climate change, and it was attended by about 75 local residents, which was a great turnout. But I'd like to present this for a response next month.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we might have a few on the gallery from that particular place. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to community question time. And thank the gallery for your patience in this. It's been a long night, I know, and but well, it's all for a good reason. So we're going to have community question time. We've received multiple questions from Colette Ballard. Are you here, Colette Ballard? Thank you. Thank you for your question. I refer to your questions to the General Manager of Livable Communities. Thank you, Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Colette, for your question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So the question received was, what time frame is anticipated for the rezoning of land in Tynong? What will be the financial structure of an infrastructure tax, and will it be spent locally? What future consultation will occur with the landholders before possible rezoning? And how will the amount of an infrastructure tax be determined? So just to give you a bit of background, back in 2015, the Minister for Planning advised Council that the Victorian Government was committed to protecting Melbourne's green wedges and maintaining existing urban growth boundaries. So proposals to expand the Nanagoon or Tynong townships beyond their existing township footprints were unlikely to be supported by the government. Now, the government's position hasn't changed since that time. So at this point in time, the state government has not announced any changes to its positions in regards to the green wedge. So therefore, any work that's been undertaken by the strategic planning team at the moment is looking at should an urban growth boundary be provided around the existing residentially zoned land, and any possible review of the existing residential zones. So this work will be undertaken over the next 12 months, but there's no plans for us to propose rezoning of land that's actually currently zoned green wedge. In regards to infrastructure tax, once the additional work has been completed, Council can commence work on land use planning strategies for the priority locations. This may include identifying what new infrastructure is required, what triggers there is for the new infrastructure, who pays for the new infrastructure, and what funding mechanisms will be used to facilitate the payment. So this work has not yet been undertaken. The last part of the question related to future consultation. So rezoning of land anywhere within the Shire requires a planning scheme amendment to be undertaken, and this is driven by state government legislation under the Planning and Environment Act. So Council firstly must obtain approval from the Minister for Planning to prepare the amendment, and then community consultation is an essential part of the planning scheme amendment process. So if we get to that stage, then there certainly will be community consultation, and anyone can lodge a submission to Council regarding any amendment process.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. You could have that in writing if you want that question answered in writing to you, Ms. Ballard, or not. Yes.
Sorry.
There's another question, isn't
sorry,
there?
the last question
Yes,
was
thank you.
how would the amount of infrastructure levy be determined? And I guess I kind of answered that one in part two by saying that at this point in time we don't know what the infrastructure will be, and therefore we can't say what the levy would be until we've actually done that work.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Is it possible to get that that question in writing back to all the questions tonight will be responded back to the questionnaires in writing back to them. Okay. We received 3 questions from Tony O'Hara. I can see Tony O'Hara's in the building as a regular attender at our council meetings. It's nice to see you, Tony. Is in the gallery tonight, so I'll refer your questions to the Executive Manager Office of the CEO, Mr. Tom McQualter. Thank you, Mr. McQualter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Tony for the questions. In relation to planning permit application DPO 16 for the Cardinia Motor Recreation and Education Park Development Plan, as councillors have already voted in favour of the sale of the land for this purpose at the Special Council meeting on Monday 23 July 2018, I believe councillors will find it very difficult to refuse this application and demonstrate they are acting in an unbiased manner. Also, refusing this application could lead to legal action from Podium 1 for false and misleading actions in the sale of the land as being fit for their purpose. The question is, will Council refer application DPO 16 to a planning panel as a duty of care to its residents? In response, councillors are regularly required to make decisions that relate to its own land and its own applications. All councillors understand their roles and responsibilities in relation to these matters as the responsible authority, and we do not consider this item to be any different. Council vehemently denies that any false or misleading conduct or behaviour has been undertaken by the council at any stage in relation to this matter. In relation to the planning panel, there's no provisions within the DPO for this matter to be referred to a planning panel for consideration. The second question, due to the recognised potential noise impact and there's a reference here to the Marshall Day Acoustics Report, Cardinia Motor Recreation and Education Complex Development Plan Acoustic Review, RP 001 2018 1004, dated 20 May 2019. From this motor sports complex on residential and other sensitive receptors, in particular Pakenham Springs Primary School, Shannon Golden Aged Care and Retirement Home, Blue Horizons, Arden and Heritage Springs Estate. Question: will council publicly advertise this proposal in local papers, including the free delivered papers, for an equivalent time of 29 days, as was done for the sale of land for the Pakenham Auto Car Facility? If not, will council extend the period for submissions by another 14 days, in all fairness in their responsibility for duty of care of the residents? Advertising was requested to be completed in accordance with the requirements of DPO 16 in this matter. This included advertising on the site, notices to adjoining owners and occupiers, and notices provided within the Pakenham Gazette. Council does not intend to extend the exhibition period. However, we do note that Council is obligated to consider all submissions that are received up until the time that a decision is made. And the third question, in relation to the same matter, pages 29 and 30 of DPO 16 includes part of the Ecology and Heritage Partners report, indicating that the development includes two of the clauses that would trigger an EES in relation to noise. The first one is potential exposure of a human community to severe or chronic health hazards or safety hazards over the short or long term due to emissions to air or water or noise or chemical hazards or associated transport. The second one is potential significant effects on the amenity of a substantial number of residents due to extensive or major long-term changes in visual, noise and traffic conditions. These are clauses included in the Environment Effects Act 1978. As this document clearly demonstrates the need for an EES, can it be confirmed that an EES will be undertaken in accordance with the ministerial guidelines for assessment of environmental effects under the Environment Effects Act 1978, in particular for the effects of noise? After all that, I have to take that question on notice. The key staff that have done the work in this space were actually away today through illness and holidays. So, Tony, I'll come back to you and get you a full answer in relation to the EES in relation to noise, but I just can't answer that tonight. Thank you.
And you will receive them by writing as well, Mr. O'Hara. We'll still send them by writing as well anyway, okay? Thank you for your questions. We have received two questions from Gloria O'Connor, and I acknowledge Gloria's in the gallery. It's nice to see you, Gloria. Thanks for coming in the gallery. And I refer to your first question to the General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment, Mr. Peter Benezik. Could you possibly read the question and answer for me, Mr. Benezik, please?
Through you, Mayor. Absolutely. Gloria, thanks for your question. And I'll read the question out. Are you aware of the serious condition of some... sorry, I'll repeat that again. Are you aware of the serious condition and in some places dangerous holes along 7 Mile Road at present between Narnagoon and Bellado Road? And of course there will be reports of other roads in similar conditions. Can you please advise what urgent work, if any, is planned? Lack of money is not a sufficient reason to leave this and other roads without attention. As residents in rural towns provide rate revenue and interface councils have to deal with the condition of the roads even if there is bad weather. Roads are also in bad conditions to the north of the highway and in other areas. Maybe there is need to put on hold some major projects in the Central Ward while rural road works are attended to. Thank you. Response. In response, council staff were attending to potholes along 7 Mile Road today. Generally, we complete patch repairs on the unsealed road network within a couple of days, often quicker. But it does depend on the number of defects that occur at the same times. More significant repairs, such as remediation works, can be done during the warmer months. Some sections of 7 Mile Road are in this year's program for more extensive works, which will be completed over the summer months.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor, for your questions. And actually, those potholes you're referring to were ones between Bellado Road and the Narnagoon Township. They were repaired on last Friday because I drove them myself. Okay, so you'll receive that information by return mail. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, that concludes tonight's proceedings. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Sorry, Gloria. We've got another question for you. I'm just ready to go. I'm ready to run. That's what the problem is. I'm sorry for my jumping to conclusions. Okay, so your second question, Ms. O'Connor, is in the wonderful hands of our Manager of Livable Communities, Ms. Parker, again. Thank you, Ms. Parker.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Gloria, for your question. So the second question was, how is it possible to see details of council projects when there is a deadline for comment or objection? Many are closed for comment before people have had the opportunity to see the details. So, Gloria, probably two things. Wasn't quite sure whether you were referring to planning applications or general strategic documents or other plans that council puts out. But in regards to both of those, for planning applications that are being advertised, these can be viewed on council's webpage under the planning permit tabs. The details of the applications are that this details all the applications that are on public exhibition. Now, this page can be updated daily as new applications are put on public exhibition, so you would have to view it a couple of times a week if you wanted to absolutely be up to date on every application that was being advertised. In regards to other council strategic documents or plans or anything else that's out for public comment, these are displayed on the Have Your Say page of council's website, and we certainly do endeavour to put them on there as soon as the exhibition period for those documents commence, to ensure that there is adequate time available for people to consider them. If you are having difficulty in meeting a time frame, you certainly can contact the relevant officer and make them aware that you might be a little bit late in getting a submission in, and that can be discussed with the council officer who's dealing with a particular project as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Parker. And thank you, Ms. Gloria O'Connor, for your questions. Now, can I? Okay, that concludes tonight's proceedings. And I want to thank you for your attendance. That's the councillors who did a fantastic job this evening. Thank you for your input. And I want to thank the gallery for their patience and for being in attendance tonight for our meeting. But I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.